There is a fault beneath your feet that most Americans have never heard of. It does not run through California. It does not follow the coastline. It does not appear in disaster movies or generate headlines during quiet years. It runs beneath the farmland of Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois, beneath the Mississippi River, beneath Memphis, beneath St. Louis, beneath Little Rock, and the last time it fully ruptured, the ground shook so violently that church bells rang in Boston. The Mississippi River flowed backwards. An entire lake appeared overnight where fields used to be. That was 1812. The fault has been quiet ever since, until now. You watched what happened in Venezuela. A magnitude 7.2 and a magnitude 7.5, 39 seconds apart. Over 1,400 dead, 68,900 missing. Buildings that had stood for decades pancaked into rubble in the time it takes to draw a single breath. And somewhere between watching that footage and moving on with your day, a question formed: could that happen beneath my city? The answer is not theoretical. It is not hypothetical. It is geological. And the geology of the central United States contains a secret that FEMA, the USGS, and every emergency manager in 8 American states has been trying to communicate for decades. A secret that the new Madrid Seismic Zone has been keeping since February 7, 1812, when it last reminded the continent what it was capable of. The new Madrid Seismic Zone is not a single fault, it is a network. A 4-segment zigzag system of buried faults stretching roughly 200 kilometers from northeast Arkansas northward through the Missouri boot heel into western Tennessee, western Kentucky, and southern Illinois. The faults responsible for this zone are not visible at the surface, and they cannot be hiked, photographed, or mapped from the ground. They are buried beneath 30 to 60 meters of soft river sediment deposited by the Mississippi River and its tributaries over millions of years. The only evidence of their existence is the pattern of small earthquakes they produce, roughly 200 per year, most too small to feel, and the geological scars they left behind in 1811 and 1812. Those scars are still there. Reelfoot Lake in northwest Tennessee, a 73-square-kilometer body of water that did not exist before December 16, 1811, was created in a single night when the earth subsided along the Reelfoot Fault and swallowed the land that had been there before. It is still there today, visible from satellite, a permanent geological monument to what this fault system is capable of when it decides to move. The new Madrid Zone owes its existence to something far older than the earthquakes it produces. Roughly 500 million years ago, during the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia, North America nearly split apart along what is now the Mississippi Valley. The process of continental rifting began. The crust thinned, weakened, fractured, and then stopped. The rift failed. The continent stayed whole. But the weakness remained, buried beneath hundreds of millions of years of sediment, preserved in the deep rock as a zone of fractured, compromised crust that has never fully healed. Scientists call it the Reelfoot Rift, and the compressive forces of ongoing plate tectonics, the slow westward drift of the North American continent, continue to load stress into that ancient wound every single day. Here is what makes the new Madrid Zone uniquely dangerous compared to every other fault system in the United States. In California, the fractured, geologically complex crust of the western margin absorbs seismic energy quickly. A magnitude 7.0 earthquake on the San Andreas Fault produces violent shaking that diminishes rapidly with distance. The affected zone is large by any measure, but it is bounded by the geology itself. The new Madrid Zone operates differently. The stable, cold, ancient rock of the continental interior transmits seismic energy with extraordinary efficiency. It does not absorb the waves. It carries them. A magnitude 7.0 earthquake in the new Madrid Zone would produce damaging shaking over an area approximately 20 times larger than the same earthquake in California. The 1811 to 1812 sequence was felt across an estimated 5 million square kilometers, roughly from Quebec to Florida, from the Rockies to the Atlantic seaboard. Church bells rang in Boston not because the earthquake was extraordinary by global standards, but because the ground beneath North America conducts energy like a drum. Now consider what is buried in that ground today. Memphis, Tennessee, sits directly above the most active segment of the new Madrid Zone. It is a city of 630,000 people in the metro area, a critical node in American infrastructure, the home of FedEx's global hub, a major rail junction, a key Mississippi River crossing point, and a regional medical center serving 5 states. FEMA has modeled what a magnitude 7.7 New Madrid earthquake would do to Memphis. The results? 2,500 deaths in Memphis alone, 86,000 injuries across the region, 730,000 people displaced from their homes. $296 billion in economic damage. Most bridges crossing the Mississippi River would be damaged or destroyed. The natural gas pipeline network beneath the Mississippi Valley would rupture at multiple points, and the soft river sediment beneath Memphis would liquefy, the ground behaving like a liquid, buildings tilting, sinking, and collapsing not from the shaking, but from the earth losing its ability to hold them. Stop for a second. 730,000 people displaced. That is more than the entire population of Memphis. The city does not sustain damage, it empties. And now here's the part of this story that most news channels have not connected. In January of 2026, the new Madrid Seismic Zone went quiet. Not slightly quiet, half quiet. Only 17 earthquakes confirmed by USGS in a month that normally produces around 30. By March, the zone had fallen into its longest stretch of complete seismic silence in recent memory. Scientists were cautious about interpreting it. Silence on a fault can mean two things. Strain is being released slowly through microfracturing the instruments cannot detect, or the fault is locked, building pressure without releasing any of it. A locked fault is not a safe fault. A locked fault is a fault accumulating the energy it will eventually discharge all at once. Then in late March, a swarm of 7 earthquakes hit the new Madrid zone in just a few days. The silence broke. And 3 months later, on June 24th, 2026, the most powerful earthquake to strike Venezuela in 125 years sent seismic surface waves traveling outward from the Caribbean at the speed of sound through solid rock, crossing the Gulf of Mexico, entering the continental crust of North America, and passing directly through the Real Foot Rift. Those waves did not cause the New Madrid fault to rupture, but they did not pass through without effect. Dynamic stress triggering, the mechanism by which surface waves from distant earthquakes load additional stress onto faults near their critical threshold, does not require proximity. It requires only two things: a fault already carrying significant accumulated strain, and a seismic wave of sufficient amplitude and appropriate frequency to nudge it. The Venezuela doublet produced both. The USGS estimates a 25 to 40% probability of a magnitude 6.0 or larger earthquake in the New Madrid zone within the next 50 years. They estimate a 7 to 10% probability of a magnitude 7.5 or larger ET, a repeat of the 1811 to 1812 sequence R in the same time frame. Those numbers do not change day to day. They are long-term probabilistic estimates based on paleoseismic data. But they were calculated before Venezuela. They were calculated before the seismic energy of a magnitude 7.5 strike-slip doublet traveled through the continental crust of North America and arrived at a fault zone that had just spent months in anomalous silence. The question scientists are now asking is not whether the new Madrid zone will rupture. Paleoseismic evidence confirms it has produced magnitude 7 or larger earthquakes at least 3 times in the last 2,000 years. The recurrence interval is estimated between 500 and 1,200 years. The last full sequence was 1811 to 1812. That is 214 years ago. The math is not reassuring. The question is what your city would look like 24 hours after the fault moves. For Memphis, the FEMA model answers that with clarity. For St. Louis, Little Rock, Evansville, and Paducah, cities sitting above or adjacent to the zone, the picture is similar. Buildings constructed before modern seismic codes, which in the central United States means the vast majority of structures built before the 1990s, are not designed to withstand the kind of shaking the new Madrid zone is capable of producing. Old brick buildings, unreinforced masonry construction, do not flex under seismic loading. They shatter, their walls collapse outward. The people inside them do not have time to move. This is not a story about distant geological time. It is not a story about something that might happen in a century. It is a story about a fault that ruptured 214 years ago, that has been accumulating strain every day since, that went silent in the months before Venezuela, that received a pulse of seismic energy from the most powerful Caribbean earthquake in over a century, and that sits directly beneath cities whose residents have largely never considered that the ground they live on is anything other than solid. The fault nobody is watching is not invisible. It is simply unfamiliar, and unfamiliar threats do not get prepared for until the moment they become impossible to ignore. By then, in Venezuela, it was already too late. Subscribe to Seismic Alert. We are watching it for you.